This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch for this Tuesday, November 24th. I'm George Thomas. Today, a potentially historic development in the Middle East as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly travels to Saudi Arabia. We'll bring you the story from Jerusalem. Here at home, President Trump opening the door for the transition to a Biden administration, though not conceding the election. But what would Biden's White House look like, and what would be his agenda? The battle for control of the Senate will be settled in Georgia, and we'll have a look at one of the tight races taking place there, with a controversy over God and the military and abortion. And with Thanksgiving travel season underway, there's hope now with new vaccines that life could get back to normal in the first part of next year. Those stories and much more, today's edition of Newswatch. But we begin with a potentially historic development unfolding in the Middle East right now. As we told you yesterday, multiple Israeli publications reported that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, along with Mossad Chief Yossi Cohen, flew to Saudi Arabia to meet with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, the reported meeting could represent a major next step in the recent peace deals known as the Abraham Accords.
During a meeting of his Likud party, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refused to confirm or deny the trip to Saudi Arabia.
My friends, I have never addressed such things along the years, and I will not start with that now. And I can only tell you that for years as Prime Minister, I have spared no effort to strengthen Israel and expand the circle of peace. And with the help of God, we managed to do that with our neighbors, with the Emirates, with Bahrain. And I also hope that this wave will always go and expand.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo did visit Saudi Arabia and met with the Crown Prince. But a Saudi official denied any Israelis were present. No such meeting occurred. The only officials present were American and Saudi. Despite the denial, Joel Rosenberg on his news site, All Israel News, said his sources confirmed the meeting. Rosenberg has organized 2 meetings with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and U.S. evangelical leaders. Rosenberg wrote, "We should be cautious in drawing any hasty conclusions that the Saudis are ready to seal a formal peace deal. But a meeting with Netanyahu could be seen as the first of many steps toward negotiating such a deal. There is a case, however, for moving quickly. Joe Biden has threatened to reassess the U.S.-Saudi alliance, which has grown strong under President Trump. President Trump has said a number of times the Saudis would eventually sign on to the Abraham Accords, the agreements a few months ago between the Israelis and Arab nations. Earlier this year, Rosenberg told CBN News what it would mean if the Saudis normalized relations with Israel and came to Jerusalem.
It would be historic if the Saudis, who are already starting to warm their relations with Israel, but if they decided that the king or the crown prince or one of their major leaders was to come here, you would be covering it, and it would be huge. It would be an epic-making moment.
On Sunday, a flight tracking website showed a plane flew from Tel Aviv to Neom, Saudi Arabia. CBN News has visited Neom in northwest Saudi Arabia, which they plan to be a city of the future.
And Chris joins me now live from Jerusalem. So, Chris, this was supposed to be a secret meeting. How did it become so public?
Well, first of all, George, I think it was meant to be made public. I think when you look at the Israeli media, that came out very soon, that this leaked information about this secret trip. Joel Rosenberg on his website, he confirmed that. He has great sources there in the Middle East and many of these Sunni Arab nations. And I would say probably the most telling thing was the transponder. You know, we just showed you that that you could track the plane all the way from Tel Aviv to Neom there in Saudi Arabia. Now, they can turn the transponder off, but they obviously meant for it to be seen. You could track that flight all the way down to Neom, which is actually, as the report says, you know, what Saudi Arabia wants to be a city of the future. But obviously, George, this was meant to be made public, I think, for political reasons here in Israel, but other reasons as well, geopolitically.
Chris, what is drawing both Saudi Arabia and Israel so close together?
Well, I'll give you 3 reasons, George. Iran, Iran, Iran. They see Iran as their mortal enemy, and they see that, they both see a potentially nuclear Iran as a mortal threat to both of them. So I think that's bringing them together. And I also think there's a change in the Kingdom of Saud as well. There's a new, younger generation that really wants to open up to the world. I think you see that in the UAE. You see that in Bahrain. I remember an interview I had with several young Saudis. And that's exactly what they were telling me. We're not the older generation. We're a new generation. We want to be open to the world, and they want to see this normalization of relations with Israel. It's really a new dawn here in the Middle East, if you could say that. You couldn't imagine this 10, 15, 20 years ago, but it seems to be a new Middle East shaping up. And you see all these Sunni Arab nations normalizing relations with Israel.
And obviously all of this coming under the Trump administration. How did President Trump manage to pull off the Abraham Accords?
Well, I think they looked at the Middle East from a new paradigm. I think for years, really decades, everyone had looked at the Middle East through the lens of the Israeli-Palestinian issue. In fact, John Kerry, the former U.S. Secretary of State under the Obama administration, there's a clip of him that says that there is no way that the Sunni Arab nations will make a peace deal with Israel unless they first settle the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the fact is, there's a famous clip of him saying that. But I think right now that these Sunni Arab nations, they have their own national interests, and they're not bound by the Israeli-Palestinian issue. All of them have the shadow of a nuclear Iran, overshadowing them, both Israel and in Saudi Arabia and these Sunni Arab Gulf states. We were there in September of 2019 when Saudi was attacked by Iran. And so they look at that as an ominous sign. That's a non-nuclear threat. But you can imagine what they would do with a nuclear umbrella of Iran.
Chris, real quickly, what's the likelihood that Saudi Arabia and Israel can come to a peace agreement before the end of the Trump administration in January?
Well, actually, there's probably an incentive for them, because if they see the Biden administration that really had appeased both Biden and Obama for many years, so they had appeased Iran, they really turned their back and abandoned some of their longtime allies like Saudi, that might be this window of time where they would want to come and make a peace deal with Israel. We'll see. We have a few months to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Terrific. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you coming on the broadcast. Chris Mitchell, Middle East Bureau Chief there in Jerusalem. Okay, folks, coming up, as President Trump clears the way for the transition to begin to a Biden administration, we'll take a look at who Biden plans to name to his top positions and what his agenda would be as president. That story in a moment. Stay with us, folks.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
Welcome back to CBN News. With President Trump recommending that his administration move ahead with a transition to a Biden administration while still not conceding the election, a Biden White House is starting to take shape, and he's now announcing key positions for cabinet. Jenna Browder has a story from Washington.
After weeks of legal battles, the Trump administration has given the go-ahead to the federal government to begin the transition process for Joe Biden's team. But the president is clear he is not conceding the election. The GSA ascertaining Monday Biden is the apparent winner of the election. This opening the door for the transition process and allowing his team to meet with federal agencies to prepare for Inauguration Day.
It would make it a lot easier if the president were to participate.
And now it appears he is. President Trump tweeting he recommended the GSA begin the process because, quote, it is in the best interest of our country, adding that he'll, quote, keep up the fight as he contests the election. This after the Trump team suffered another legal setback Monday, Michigan certifying its results, giving Biden a win.
So do you expect Republicans to put up any significant roadblocks to your nominations?
Are you kidding me?
Meanwhile, Biden is starting to announce his cabinet nominees, many of them former members of the Obama administration. He's expected to name former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen as the first woman to be Treasury Secretary, and is also nominating the first female Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines. At Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas would become the first Latino director, plus Antony Blinken as Secretary of State and John Kerry in a top climate position.
3 words, a safe establishment process.
CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody says the Biden team is staying in the middle.
And they're going to make sure that folks that Biden trusts and are not far left, well, John Kerry's kind of far left, but a lot of them are going to be more down that center left lane, and I think that's what you're going to see.
And Inauguration Day is January 20th, now less than 60 days away. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thank you, Jenna. So if Biden does take office as president, what would be his agenda? Some are concerned that in certain areas his administration could be more radical than Obama's. Dale Hood has that story.
The so-called progressive wing of the Democratic Party hopes a possible Biden administration delivers. Even Bernie Sanders, who as a young socialist honeymooned in the Soviet Union, says he expects to be happy with a Biden administration's progressive agenda.
I fully expect that the Biden administration will be advocating those proposals that they agreed to.
And that should make conservatives concerned.
Conservatives will find the wish list for the Democrats' agenda to be expensive, intrusive, and scary.
Terry Jeffrey, editor-in-chief at CNSNews.com, has studied Joe Biden's campaign promises.
He is proposing really to be a radical president. He's going to be far left. He's not a moderate in terms of the policy promises he has made.
As president, Biden has said he wants to turn the Roe v. Wade abortion decision into federal law and make it part of taxpayer-funded health care. He's promised to order insurance companies to cover sex change operations.
He's going to issue an order, he says, on his first day in office that forces all public colleges and public schools to recognize the quote-unquote gender of a person's choice, of a student's choice, and then let them play on the sports teams, use the locker rooms, use the restrooms of the sex they claim to be, not the sex that they are anatomically or biologically.
Biden wants to prohibit anyone convicted of a misdemeanor hate crime from owning a firearm. A misdemeanor hate crime in some states can simply be advocating too strongly against the gay agenda. Biden's transition team leader for media, Richard Stengel, has said he wants to redefine freedom of speech and wrote in the Washington Post that he thinks hate speech should be made a crime. His possible choice for press secretary, Karina Jean-Pierre, has been described by the Jewish Voice as an anti-Israel radical. The election results are still being disputed, and Biden may not get much of anything through Congress, but he could still do a lot through executive orders.
I think that Vice President Biden campaigned on an incredibly progressive and aggressive agenda. He's going to make good on those commitments.
Conservatives who voted for Joe Biden because they didn't like Donald Trump could be very surprised by the far-left agenda they helped install in the White House. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
One other note, Biden is expected to travel to Georgia to campaign for the Democratic candidates in the 2 Senate runoff races there in early January that will determine which party controls the Senate. One of those races between incumbent Republican Kenny Loeffler and Democratic challenger Raphael Warnock is being fueled by nearly a decade-old sermon by Warnock saying America needs to choose between serving God and serving the military. Eric Phillips brings us that story.
The runoff election between Democrat Reverend Raphael Warnock and Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler will factor greatly in determining the balance of power in the Senate. It's why everything is on the line right now, including a sermon Reverend Warnock preached 9 years ago. This is the part of the 2011 sermon creating ire on the right.
America, nobody can serve God and the military. You can't serve God and money. You cannot serve God and mammon at the same time. America, choose ye this day whom you will serve.
The words prompting harsh rebuke from Warnock's Republican opponent, Kelly Loeffler, who tweeted, "Reverend Warnock, you owe every active duty military service member and veteran an apology. Shameful." RNC spokesperson Liz Harrington called the sermon insulting.
In fact, this nation was founded on brave men and women willing to enter into the fray and fight for our freedoms and sacrifice so much.
I think it's unfortunate and shameful that they are trying to distort not only my message, but the message of Scripture.
Warnock defended his words during this virtual press conference.
What I was expressing was the fact that as a person of faith, my ultimate allegiance is to God. And therefore, whatever else that I may commit myself to, it has to be built on a spiritual foundation. It is a spiritual lesson that is basic and foundational for people of faith.
More criticism came the same week after this tweet from Reverend Warnock, which said, "I will always fight for reproductive justice." Former NFL player and devout pro-life Christian Benjamin Watson clapped back, "Pastor, equal access to kill a son or daughter is not justice."
I think these statements are a pattern by Mr. Warnock that shows very outside of the mainstream views that he holds that I think are too extreme and too radical for Georgia, but too radical for the majority of Americans as well.
Warnock explained during the press conference that he has many veterans in his congregation who heard that sermon back in 2011, and they weren't confused about the message. He also said previously that the right to choose, or reproductive justice as he calls it, is a part of health care, which he says is a human right. He says government should not interfere with that decision-making process, and he says that is consistent with his view as a Christian minister. Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Still ahead with the Thanksgiving travel season underway and coronavirus cases on the rise across the country. Despite concern that the disease could spread more in the days ahead, there is growing hope for vaccines to fight the virus. We'll have that story right after this.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, A new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to cbnnewschannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. With the Thanksgiving travel season underway, coronavirus cases are rising sharply across the country. Over 80,000 people right now hospitalized. But vaccines are expected soon, and life could be heading back to normal in the first part of next year. Tara Mergener brings us that story from Washington.
Scientists have been working tirelessly for a breakthrough to fight the virus. And now, ahead of the holiday, AstraZeneca is the third drug company to say it has come up with a highly effective vaccine.
Despite repeated warnings from the nation's top docs,
you're in a crowded airport. Not everybody's wearing masks. That puts yourself at risk.
People are still taking to the skies and highways traveling for the holiday.
I'm asking Americans, I'm begging you, hold on just a little bit longer. Keep Thanksgiving and the celebration small.
This as scientists work frantically for a breakthrough to reel in the deadly virus.
We definitely do not want to see Thanksgiving family get-togethers be Christmas family funerals.
But now, more good news on the vaccine front.
We've never had more reason for hope thanks to the science.
AstraZeneca is testing 2 dosing regimens, one showing 62% efficacy, the other 90%.
To get 90%, what you have to do is to give a half dose for the first immunization and a full dose for the second immunization.
Pfizer filed its FDA application for emergency use authorization on Friday. Moderna is expected to be right behind them. Operation Warp Speed's chief scientific advisor believes the first vaccinations could come by mid-December.
With the level of efficacy we have, 95%, 70% or so of the population being immunized would allow for true herd immunity to take place. That is likely to happen somewhere in the month of May.
Meanwhile, Regeneron's antibody treatment, the same one used by the president, has been granted emergency use authorization from the FDA for people over 12 and those at high risk of COVID complications. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Coming up, it's an annual tradition. The official White House Christmas tree is here. We'll bring you a look at this year's tree when we come back. Stay with us.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5.
Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep.
Check out the CBN News Daily Rundown podcast each weekday with me, Caitlin Burke. Click on the show tab at cbnnews.com where you can listen and subscribe.
And finally, today, Christmas is coming to the White House in a tradition dating back to 1966. First Lady Melania Trump welcomed the arrival of the official White House Christmas tree on Monday. The First Lady tweeting, the 18.5-foot Fraser fir comes from Dan and Brian Trees, a Christmas tree farm in West Virginia. The tree will be the centerpiece of the White House Blue Room. And this isn't the first time Dan and Brian Trees has had the honor of blessing the White House with one of their trees. They also provided the official tree back in 2009 when President Barack Obama was in office. Well, folks, that is it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen. Email us at newswatch@cbn.com, or you can reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. From all of us here from the headquarters of the Christian Broadcasting Network in Virginia Beach, Virginia, have a fantastic rest of the day. Hope you join us again next time. Goodbye. God bless.